Hello all. Just an announcement before we start this. It's pretty simple. Today's discussion. This again came from LinkedIn. Somebody had this question. So if you know how the posting routine works in nav/Business Central, then maybe you don't need to look at this video. But if you don't know about it, or if you're pretty new in Business Central world, then uh, let's talk about it. So the question was that I'm pretty new in Business Central world. I would like to understand how you take value of a field from, let's say, sales at a table to customer ledger entry during sales order post. Which, when you ask people who have worked with nav/Business Central, for them it's a pretty common thing. But for a new resource, it can be a tricky situation to understand the business logic. And I always say this, at least in my company where I have, you know, people coming up with these kind of question, is Business Central is not a product where you just can be a technical consultant. What you need to be is to be a consultant where you need to know the business processes so that you can then customize the business process as it's required. So I was discussing something similar to one of my colleagues today, and we were talking about, okay, what you think are the possible solution. And because the colleague is pretty new in Business Central, he said, "Oh, what about we have an event on insert of customer ledger entry? We just pick that, and we also have the value fetched from the sales order, and during the insert, we plug it in." Now, I call it as a technical solution of it. There might be some nuances around it, why it is right or wrong, and people can argue about it and debate about it. But at the end of the day, it's a technical solution which is not thinking about the process that a business solution requires. So I'm going to take a very simple example today to understand it. And I'm pretty sure there are complex scenarios, there are complex situations, but the idea is to not to make it very complex, at least this particular question or this particular demo, so that we at least understand the basic flow of, let's say, a posting process, and then see how it actually happens in the nav or business central world so that we can customize it as per our need. So let's take an example of a sales order, and we'll keep it very simple. What a sales order need? A sales order need on the top the information of the customer who who is trying to purchase something from you, which means you are selling something to them. So you'll need the header part is whom you are selling it to, the customer. So the header part, which is other than anything other than the lines tab on your sales order page, is all about the, the company or the person who is buying the product from you or whom you are selling the product to or services to. So it talks about different things around those things: customer name, contact detail, tax, order date, due dates, and other things. And I'm not going into detail of it. I might not know all of this, to be very fair. What currency they deal with, what is their shipping and billing info, are they a foreign trade customer, and so on and so forth. Then, as a customer, like you will go and you will buy stuff. You may buy one item, you may buy 10 items, you may buy different kind of services, not item. You might buy services, and that's where your lines part comes into the picture, where what you are selling to your customer, it can be one item, it can be 10 items, it can be item, service, or anything else. All that detail kind of gets into the lines area. Now, when you go back and let's pick any of these examples, there are certain detail which are already filled in based on when this order was created, who is the customer, oh, what kind of invoicing details they have, what kind of shipping and billing they have, is there a foreign trade and so on and so forth. And then that customer is buying an item, bicycle, by quantity from you with this unit price and so on and so forth. Now, when you try to post it, as we have seen the preview posting last week or in the last video, you see there are a lot of ledgers being created when you post a sales order. There is GL entry, which is the financial impact of the sales order. There's a customer ledger entry, which means how much customer need to pay for this, which is a customer ledger. Item ledger entry, because you are selling something, that means it will reduce from your item inventory, so that entry gets created. And then if there are tax involved, then tax entries and value is what is the value of the item that you sold kind of gets here. And then there is a detailed customer ledger entry based on which the customer ledger entry so called is created. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to take an example where there is one, obviously, there is a customer who's buying one item from you, and what kind of processes go through it. So let's get out of Business Central and let's try to understand it with a very simple flow. And I can be completely wrong, guys. It's my the way I learned it, so I can be completely wrong. So what happens when you start creating or building a sales order is you start dealing with two major tables, which is sales header and sales line. These tables in the Business Central world are called transactional table, where you are actually having a transaction. As we talked about, sales header contains the detail of whom you are selling it, and the lines contain detail of what you are selling, items, resources, GL accounts, and other options that you have there. Now, at the end, what we would like to see is all these different kind of documents getting created. There will be a sales invoice document if you invoice it. There will be a shipment document if there is something that's being shipped, and then there are so on and so forth other entries that get created: GL entries, customer ledger entry, and item ledger entry. Now, how you actually understand this, as in the old days of NAV, um, for the sales posting routine, these were the three key code units that you need to understand somehow by debugging. The typical way of in the old school was to debug these to understand this, because this will tell you everything from a basic sales posting. Your code unit 80 is when you click on that button, which is called post, gets invoked, and then within the code unit 80, there are references which calls code unit 12 and calls code unit 22, which have their own purposes. So what happens is when you click on the post button, the code unit 80 gets triggered, which automatically, without going to any other code units, creates a sales invoice header, sales invoice line, shipment header and line, not in the same order, as in they're not the first ledgers that get created, but eventually it automatically gets created from code unit 80. That code is there in code unit 80 to do that. After that, what happens is the code unit 80 then creates two sets of entries: a journal line and an item journal line if there is an item involved. And I'm just taking an example just to keep it simple, that an item being sold. There will be other journal lines for other kind of services that you're selling. But to keep it simple, a journal line is created, which is majorly based on the header, sales header part of it, which is the customer part of it. Whereas the item is about what's being sold to the customer. The journal line is then passed to code unit 12, whereas the item journal line is then passed to code unit 22 to further process it. At this point, in the whole transaction, the code unit 12 eventually creates something called as GL register, and code unit 22 creates the item register, which means the summary of what's going to happen when this gets created. A GL entry will keep a record, or GL register will keep a record of the GL entry that will be created for this transaction, which is a combination of who bought it, at what price they bought it, how much they owe us, and then the different accounts that those different values will get entered. And then from GL entry, a customer ledger entry will be created. In the same way, the item register will be created, which will eventually create the item ledger entry. And you can go complex into it. There are so many permutations and combinations into it. But in summary, what you need to understand that anytime you hit a ledger, that is not happening directly. That always happens from a journal. So either you post from a journal, which is again a transactional page or a transactional table, journal line, or you post from a document like sales order, sales order, sales invoice, purchase order, purchase invoice. Even then, the transaction get into ledger via journals. So remember this: the flow will always be to ledgers will always go from the journals. So eventually, you will have to come to journal. So when you're talking about that you would like to move a field from sales header to customer ledger entry, that means it will go from sales header to general line. From general line, it will go to customer ledger entry eventually. If you have a similar question about item, then that'll go from item general line to item ledger entry. I typically don't prefer to talk about the code that goes into it, but just out of this question that came up, let's quickly look at it from that perspective. So what I've already done is I have a sales order table where I've added this field called demo description, which is also available on the customer master and also on the customer ledger entry, which is our target table. In the same way, it's added on the page of sales order, it's added on the customer ledger entry page, and it's also on the customer card. And then we have this code unit, which we haven't done anything right now. So let's start it from there. That the value is actually, as the question suggests, is available on my customer table. As soon as that customer gets into a transaction, which is a sales order, let's say, then first let's pass this value from customer to sales header. So when you get into the sales header, let's try to find that out. You might have to see it on the system. It's pretty simple that as soon as you validate or assign a customer to your sales order record, it automatically populates some additional fields which are derived from that master entity. So just to take an example, as soon as you validate or choose the customer number on a sales order, it automatically says, oh, this is the customer name, this is its phone number, this is their default location, this is their default address, this is their other settings which are available. And that works in the same way about when you are dealing with the items, let's say. When you're dealing with the items, it's also picks that value. Let me reload the screen. It also picks that value, and whatever the related fields that need to be filled in from that master entity will automatically populate in that transactional table, which is sales header in our case. So let's quickly see that if we can. Okay, now it's get loaded. Let's go into the sales header. Something would happen when somebody will validate the sell to customer number. That's what you validate. So, okay, if I come down here and if I see here, okay, there's a init happening. There is this init record, insert record, reset, so on and so forth. And then, okay, it says on after check, copy sell to customer address field from customer. That means saying the function is self-explanatory. It says that, okay, anytime somebody validates this, I would like to go ahead and do the copying from customer. So let's go into that function, procedure. I might not be good at it, but let me search for it. Okay, here it is. What it does, it copies the sell to customer name and other fields which are needed. But if you come down here at the end of it, it says on after copy sell to customer address field from customer. So let's utilize this. So let's do a copy of this. Let's come back to our code unit and let's first test it out using a subscriber, doing it on table, call it as database, and then this is sales header. On which event we just copied? Is there a field? No. Do you want to skip on missing license? No. Do you want to skip if there is no permission? No. And then I say copy custom fields. What are my variables that I need? I need the customer record and I also need the sales header record. What I need to do, I need to say that sales header dot sdh demo description gets its value from sell to customer dot sdh demo description. So anytime the validation will happen, this code will automatically, this event subscriber will be fired and this code will get copied to your sales header. So now in a bigger diagram, if you remember that, we have the data available. Okay, sorry, I didn't like that. Now the data is available here. Now the next thing is to see how we can pass this data from the sales header entity to the journal line in this case. So let's get into code unit 80 and see what's available there. So when I go into code unit 80, which is called from code unit 81, as in you can surely talk about it and get into details of it. There's a lot of it. Okay, let's see what happens. It validates some dates and all. Then it sets some booleans. It gets some setups. And we'll talk about this again. It checks and updates the header. There's this interface. Then it gets into the line. There's an event coming down here. Okay. At this point, it is doing the line posting, which is here, post sales line. So every first your lines kind of get posted. Once the line posting is done, it comes here, it checks is it a credit document and then does something. Then if it is an invoice, it says post the invoice. Now here we are talking about posting the value of that invoice. So let's go and check what this method does. At this point, what the code is trying to say here that on before post invoice, there is an event with the sales header, do this, then if there is tax involved, do this. And then it says here at 1055 is post customer entry. Okay, we are good there. So let's go into that method and search for it. Here it is. It's going to be obsolete. We'll talk about it in some other video. But as of today, what happens is it creates a new journal line based on certain parameter of sales header. Then it copies the field, then it defines the account type and account number, and it copies some from sales header, and then it does other things, and then it posts it. Now, when it is copying from sales header, that's where, because now our value is in the sales header, so we can actually utilize this method to see what's happening on this method, where it is copying things from sales header. So let's see what happens. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong there. Is it post customer entry? Yes. That method, copy from sales header, exists in the journal line. Okay. So let's copy this and let's go into the journal line. So the journal line table should have a method which is copy from sales header. What it is doing, it is assigning the value on journal line based on the sales header. At the end of it, there is an event on after copy journal line from sales header. Looks nice. Let's pick this up. Come here and we will do it more or less in the similar way. but this time it's happening on general line. So we'll go and we'll say, okay, we would like to call a event from my general line table. Okay, the event name is copy it from sales header, and then eventually this is copy from sales header. Okay, there will be different parameters here. Let's identify those. Okay, it's trying to save it. So what you are trying to do is you are trying to copy it from the sales header to general line. But for that, we'll also need a table extension on general line. What I'll do is I'll just copy all this. Where is the copy? Okay, there it is. I'll do a new file and I'll call it sdh journal line dot table extension dot al. Okay, just trying to save that. But eventually, what we are trying to do right now is we are trying to get the value, whatever is stored in the sales header that came from the customer, and we would like to get it into my journal line. Once it comes into journal line, we'll move to the next step. So let's wait for this to be created. Okay, so this got created, and let me add that here. From here, let me pick the table name on which I would like to create the extension to. So I'll change it to general line, and I'll change this also to general line. I've just added the same field into general line. That's temporarily needed to retain the value in general line before we move to the next step. So as it gets saved here, I'll come back here and I'll say, okay, the problem here. It says copy custom field. Oh, it needs to reload itself. Sometimes it kind of takes some time to do that. But eventually the idea would be to move that value from there to here. So I'll let it compile it. Okay. So this seems to be compiled. Now let's try to get the variables here. It's a sales header, and then there is pass as reference as general line. What I have to do, I have to just say, okay, pick this from, put it on general line from the sales header table, and enable this. So now the value is in my general line. Okay. Now we need to move that general line value to customer ledger entry in this case. How you do that? Let's go back here. Let's see, when you do this, it creates the new line, and then after the line is created, it calls this, which is run with check. Now if you go from here, let's go to definition if I can, and here I am, run with check. It then calls the function code, and right now if you look at it, we are sitting at code unit 12 to post this. So the code function does it some checks and balances, and then it says, okay, if everything looks good, then let's start posting the general line. How it does post the general line? Let's have a look. It says whatever the account type is. In our case, the account type is customer. It says post customer. Okay. When you go into the post cust, what it says here is, okay, do some fetch of some setup, some accounts, and all those details, and then init the customer ledger entry. And then whatever happens is rest standard. You should surely debug this process once to understand this. But when I go into this method, what it is doing, it says create a new customer ledger entry by copying from the general line. So what it is saying, to get a value on customer ledger entry, you can actually copy it from the general line. Okay. So that means there is a method there. So let's go and search for it. If we can, if you cannot, should search for this. And then here, there should be a reference to this so that we can go there. Okay. And in this table, customer ledger entry, I have a method, again, copy from general line, which also gives me an event like this. So let's go back to our code unit and we have a new event that we need, which is coming from which table? Table 21, customer ledger entry. Okay. So let's again define an event sub. This time again, it's based on a table, database, and the table is this. What is the event that we are looking for? Is this. We care. Yes, we do, and we'll set these parameters as it is. If you don't know why I'm setting these parameters the way I'm setting it, let me know. We'll surely talk about it. And I'll say copy from journal to ledger. And here is my journal line, and here is my customer ledger entry. Again, the code remains same. Customer ledger entry dot this coming from journal line dot this. So technically speaking, if I have used the right event in the right place, this is what it takes to move a field from your header to your ledger, especially the customer ledger at this moment when we're talking about it. So now just to verify this, let's test this out once. Control F5 and let's see once it gets published. We will start testing this out. Okay, that got published. We went into our customer entity and then from there we pick the customer, let's say 20,000. We see this field, SDH demo description. Let's key in the value. This is a demo description to test posting custom. Okay, we have saved it into the master. Anytime we should create a new sales order, which I'm going to do now, it should get copied from here to my sales order. Okay. I might have to refresh or please open my environment. Let me do that so that it understands what kind of changes I have made. Okay, so I'm on 20,000 and I choose new document and say sales order. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Is there a way to log out? Let me try that and sign in again. Hopefully this works this time. Okay, so 20,000, new document, sales order. Nothing happened right now. It is waiting for the number. As soon as I get the number, you'll see all these fields, including my custom field, has been copied from the sales order based on our event subscriber that we have written. Now let's sell rims, quantity 2, and then unit price 10, and tax group as non-taxable. Okay. So before we make any change, let's do a preview posting to see is everything going the way as expected. Where we would like to check on customer ledger entry. Is there a value for my custom field? I don't know because that's not part of it, which is okay. So now let's try to post it and see what happens. I'm going to do a ship an invoice and I need to open my posted invoice. Yes. From here, I can always do a find entries, check all my ledgers, go to my ledger where I did the code. And at the end of it, there should be the demo description that's available. So what you should be understanding from this at this point is that okay, let me go exactly at the end of it if I can. That the value that in this demo we utilize is stored on a master entity, which is a customer entity. What we did is utilizing event subscriber, we move that value from the master entity to the transactional record, which is sales order in this case. Then from there, using an event subscriber, we move that value to journal line. And from journal line, It actually went in the ledgers. Now, when you think about item, where you have an item scenario, let's assume you need to read your code unit 80 to identify the flow where the item journal is being created. And that way, you will eventually then move it to item ledger entry following the same kind of pattern. Now, remember this, there are different ways of doing things business wise. So, this is just a straight example of when you are doing everything shipment and invoice from your sales order screen, and that's way it's working. But there are different ways to do the same thing in different businesses. Spend some time with the product, understand it from the perspective of a business solution. Even if you are titled as technical consultant in a product like Business Central, you need to understand the business processes, and then you'll be able to customize it the way your customer needs it. I know it sounds pretty easy, and it is pretty easy once you understand it. So sorry if you knew about it and you were watching it. Sorry, I didn't want it to waste your time. But I'll see you in the next video whenever I get a question or if I find something interesting on a community forum somewhere. And we'll just be doing this whenever we get time. Again, if you like the video, do subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends and colleagues who are also struggling, maybe also struggling with a similar kind of process, to help other members in the community and make it as a better community as we can. Have a great day. See you next time. Thank you.